Have you ever wondered what you'd see if you could just pause the entire world for a moment? What would one single day tell us about, well, everything? That's exactly what we're about to do. We're taking a snapshot of the globe on one single 24-hour period. So let's set the scene. The date is October 20th, 2025. Just a regular Tuesday, right? You'd think so. But on the surface, things can be deceiving. But if you look closer, really zoom in, you start to see all the fractures, but also all the connections that define our time. We're talking trade wars, fragile peace deals, you name it. This one day shows us a world that's more connected than ever, but also maybe more divided. So come on, let's connect the dots.
All right, first up, the global economy. Think of it like a giant game board, but right now, it feels like someone's flipped the board over. The old rules, they're out the window. And instead, new walls are going up everywhere you look, and they're going up fast. Okay, get ready for this number. 100%. That's not a typo. That is the massive, jaw-dropping tariff the Trump administration just slapped on certain imported pharmaceuticals. This is one of the boldest, most aggressive protectionist moves we've seen in ages. It's actually pushing average U.S. tariffs to a level we haven't seen in a century.
And you know this isn't happening in a vacuum, right? This isn't a one-way street. No, this is like firing the starting gun on a whole new round of the global trade war. And the reaction? It was immediate. China is already hitting back, aiming right for American heavy hitters like soy and Boeing. And the EU? They're right behind, promising they're going to do the same. So while the U.S. is busy building these economic walls, China's dealing with some serious problems of its own, right at home. The news today is that their Q3 GDP numbers just came out, and they missed the mark. They were aiming for 5%, but landed at 4.6. Now, that might not sound like a huge miss, but it's their slowest growth in a full year. So the big question is, why? What's going on here? Well, it's not just one thing, it's a whole mix. You've got a property market that's just stuck in a slump. Then you've got the ripple effects from those very tariffs we were just talking about. People at home aren't spending as much either. And on top of all that, youth unemployment is hovering at a really tough 17%. That's a serious headache for President Xi. And these kinds of economic earthquakes, they don't just stop at the border. The tremors are rolling right across the Atlantic, and they are shaking things up big time in Europe. You can just feel the pressure building. Over in France, they're wrestling with a huge deficit. In Germany and Poland, you've got the chaos of snap elections looming. And remember those U.S. tariffs? Well, for Europe, that puts a whopping 200 billion euros worth of exports on the line. All this is happening while people are on the streets demanding more money for defense. It really is a perfect storm of money problems, political drama, and trade disputes. Okay, so that's the money side of things. But this tension, it doesn't just stay on spreadsheets. Let's shift gears and look at how it's spilling over into military and political hotspots across the globe. Listen to these 3 words that came out today from Australia's Defense Ministry. A deliberate escalation. Chilling, right? They're talking about a Chinese military jet getting dangerously close to an Australian plane and then deploying flares. And this all happened over international waters. And where this happened is so important. We're talking about the South China Sea. This isn't just empty ocean, it's basically a superhighway for global trade. So a high-stakes game of chicken like this, it's not just a military flare-up. It's playing with fire right next to the global supply chain. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the economic fallout could be massive. But while these superpowers are clashing in the skies, power is also shifting on the ground. On this very same day, let's turn our attention to South America, specifically to Bolivia, a country that, believe it or not, is central to the world's pivot to clean energy. What's happened is that a centrist candidate, Rodrigo Paz, just won the presidency, and not by a little. He got 54% of the vote. This is a huge deal because it marks the end of 20 years of leftist rule. And all of this is going down while the country is struggling with insane inflation and big fights over who controls its massive lithium deposits. You know, the stuff that powers all our batteries? This is a political shift that could totally change the game for who gets access to that critical resource. Meanwhile, halfway across the world in Ukraine, the long, grinding war seems to have hit a turning point. We're years into this brutal stalemate, and now, today, the White House is really cranking up the pressure to get ceasefire talks going. And the word is, they're putting sanctions relief on the table in exchange for potential territorial concessions. And if you want to know why, here's a number that says it all. 20%. That's how much of Ukraine is currently under Russian control. That's the cold, hard reality on the ground. You combine that with just pure exhaustion in Kyiv and the political winds changing in allied countries, and suddenly everyone is being forced to have a very, very difficult conversation about how this war actually ends.
All right, for this last part, let's step away from the big picture politics and economics for a second. Let's look at the human stories playing out behind all these headlines. These are stories about real people, real consequences, and even a few glimmers of hope. And we start with a huge breakthrough in the Middle East. Today, the final 20 surviving Israeli hostages were released from Gaza. This is a massive step forward in a ceasefire deal put together by the U.S. I mean, you can only imagine the relief for those families. But, and this is a big but, this is just step one. The long, hard road to a real, lasting peace, that's only just beginning. Okay, now for something genuinely historic. The International Energy Agency confirmed it today. In the first half of this year, for the very first time in human history, renewables, we're talking solar and wind, generated more of the world's electricity than coal. I mean, wow, that is a massive tipping point. And a huge part of that story, interestingly, is China's incredible push into building solar farms. But here's a sharp contrast. Even as China is leading the charge on green energy, President Xi is also doubling down on a really controversial policy at home. Today, he pushed for a faster Sinicization of religion. What does that mean? Well, it means tightening state control over religions like Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism, trying to force them to fit in with socialist values. Critics, of course, see it as a way of erasing unique cultural and religious identities. And it just goes to show all these huge global changes are happening inside these incredibly complicated systems. And sometimes those systems are shockingly fragile. We got a tragic reminder of that today in Hong Kong. A cargo plane crashed during takeoff. 2 people were killed, and the accident shut down one of the busiest air cargo hubs on the entire planet. So let's zoom back out for a second. We've seen all these different pieces. What has this one day, October 20th, 2025, really told us about our world? Well, for one thing, it's a world just full of contradictions, isn't it? On the one hand, you have these incredible, fragile moments of hope, like the hostage release in Gaza. And at the exact same time, you have these giant economic walls going up between the world's biggest powers. You see powers shifting, not just with military jets, but in a ballot box in South America, and even in the very way we power our lives. You know, from that tragic crash in Hong Kong to the election results in Bolivia, every single thing that happened today is like a single thread in this incredibly complex global web. And what today has really shown us is just how interconnected that web is, but also how easily it can be torn. None of these are separate stories. They're all part of one big unfolding story, which leaves us with the biggest question of all, right? In a world this on edge, what on earth happens tomorrow?